Go. Okay, in 2010, I was invited to do the public art for the Hamilton Community Center in Richmond. This is a community center that's attached to the Hamilton Elementary School. And I was asked to create something to do with the heritage of Hamilton. So I was given free rein as to what I wanted to do. They were asking about heritage, fishing, agricultural activities, and natural environment. So there was a fair amount to look at and try and explore. I did some research at the archives. A lot of my work has to do with maps, where I use maps in my work. So I went to the archives and went to see what information there was about Hamilton. I actually had no idea there was a Hamilton in British Columbia. Turns out it's right on the far right side of that map. It's as far as you can go in Richmond without being in New West. And it's a very small area, and it was kind of hard to find specific information about things that went on. I found beautiful pictures of ships and fishing, showing the abundance of fish that used to be here. And one of the things that, for my work, you have to find images not only that tell a story, but images that are visually interesting. So I found lots of images, but I had to find images that would work with the process that I was going to use. Here were some of these steamships that went up and down the Fraser. By this time, it was a very short timeline for this project. It was partially funded by the stimulus funding from the federal government. So we had 6 months, and it had to be finished. Everything had to be installed. There were just some cute images. By this time, I'd decided that I was going to be using corian to make my images, and that's the material that some of you may have as your kitchen counters. And so in order to do images for the kitchen counter, to cut into corian, I had to choose specific images. So you can see this is the sort of material I chose. Don't ask me why now. It gave some challenges that I hadn't anticipated, because at that time I hadn't decided which images I was going to use. And I realized that I needed to find images that could be cut into the corian. So I needed images that weren't so photographic. So this was the old school. The Hamilton School actually originally started further west in Richmond and had been moved to the Hamilton area. And the old schoolhouse you can see at the top, and this is how it was refurbished. The community center in the elementary school that's there now is no longer this building. I also chose the image of a dredger because it was used to build the dikes in Richmond, which really was very important. So these two images became key in my work. And then I went looking for maps, old maps and new maps. I wanted to show the difference, how Hamilton had changed over time. And there were maps from 1938, which is the one on the left, and on the right is from a Google map. So I used these two maps, and again, I had to convert these maps so that I could cut them into the corian. I also listened to a lot of the oral histories that they have at the archives, wonderful stories about Richmond, and there was so much rich information. You obviously can't see this at the back there, but there was information about the early pioneers. The guy Hamilton was a berry farmer. There were tugboats. There were the Japanese people who got sent to the interior. There were all these different stories, and I had to choose what information I was going to put in my piece. This was an early iteration of my piece where I tried to put in a lot of the text and information. After consultation with the committee that I was working with from the community members, they decided that we really should simplify things and just go with the history of the street names of Hamilton. So the wall piece actually ended up looking like this, which thankfully was a much less cluttered and much more interesting visual piece, at least I think so. And people could go up to it and see their street name and find out that James Smith was a Richmond councillor, or Gilly was a tugboat captain. Then I also found a map of the Veterans Land Act subdivision. In 1942, there was an area that was set aside for servicemen and their families coming back from the war. And they were each given an acre and a 2-bedroom house. And the little houses were like this one at the bottom. And this was something that I thought was really relevant to Hamilton, because part of Hamilton was for the Veterans Land Act. So this is actually where my piece had to be cut first into test pieces so that I could check that everything was right with the machinery, so that when we cut it into the Korean, I hadn't misspelled a name or got a street in the wrong place. And then this is the cutting of the Korean with a computer-operated machine that cut all the images out of the Korean, and then they were filled with resin to give the black and white images. And so this was actually for a table, a coffee table that is in the Hamilton Community Center, that shows the Veterans Land Act, shows this is the standard house, and I had to change this image so that it could be cut out of the Korean. And that was an interesting exercise for me. I'm now a lot better at converting photographic images to line drawings. As public artists, we get to learn a lot as we do each project. I had to decide whether I didn't put the awning over the front door, because it couldn't be seen so easily. It wouldn't be such a clear image. So we have to make those sort of decisions. So this is the table that is at the community center with the map on the top. There's road names so that people could locate where that subdivision is in Hamilton. And the little house and the little draped window. And I put some text on so people could relate to that, and the elementary school children could have a look at this and get a bit of a sense of history and their sense of community. I really believe that if people know a bit about their community, they feel a much better sense of belonging. And that's really part of what I do with my art, is try to connect people with their community. So this is the final piece in the community center. If any of you ever go to East Richmond, you can see it there. Thank you.